There are 22 participants on the call, including you. You are joining your conference as a participant. For a menu of available commands, press *#. Your connection is now in listen-only mode.
Of a small program here at the California Department of Public Health that works as part of Caltrans Active Transportation Resource Center. The ATRC, as we're also known, provides technical assistance, training, and resources to the Active Transportation Program, both to funded awardees and others that are interested in promoting active transportation throughout California. The California Department of Public Health's role in the ATRC is to focus on supporting non-infrastructure projects, including safe routes to school efforts. I'm joined in the room today by my colleague Jane Kemp, and we are both pleased and excited to be able to host today's training. So if you're joining us today, the title of our teleconference is How Metropolitan Planning Organizations are Supporting Active Transportation Education, Encouragement, and Enforcement Efforts, which combine for non-infrastructure, in California. This is a facilitated discussion and part 2 of a series. We had our part 1 call that featured primarily urban regions, and that was at the end of July. This teleconference presents a unique opportunity for Caltrans ATP non-infrastructure and combination non-infrastructure and infrastructure projects, as well as other interested stakeholders, to learn from a diverse panel of MPO representatives about how the regions are supporting local and regional active transportation non-infrastructure efforts and engaging communities in active transportation education and encouragement activities. As you'll learn today, some of these efforts are funded directly through ATP, and some are funded through different sources that are being used to also enhance conditions for walking and bicycling. Our purpose in showcasing this variety of programming is to reflect on the depth and range of active transportation non-infrastructure happenings across the state, to broaden awareness of our regional partner efforts, and to hopefully spark new ideas, conversation, and/or collaboration that builds a culture around safe walking and bicycling and more walking and bicycling for transportation purposes. So our format is that we're going to start out with panelist verbal presentations. Then we'll ask the panelists to respond to 4 questions that we have received in advance of, from participants all over the state. During this process, we will have time for approximately 1 to 2 brief follow-up questions from the audience per each question. After which we will go through all 4, after we go through all 4 questions, we will hopefully have a few minutes for additional audience questions before a quick wrap-up. So, who are our esteemed panelists? We are very fortunate to have a wonderful, diverse panel from across the state. I will briefly mention who they are now. Then when they give their presentations, they will share a bit more about their roles and what their agencies are doing to support walking and bicycling. So on the call we have Carrie McNichol, who is an Assistant Program Specialist from the San Joaquin Council of Governments. We have Stephen Hanamaikai, an Associate Regional Planner from Stanislaus Council of Governments. Dan Wayne, a Senior Planner from Shasta Regional Transportation Agency. Mara Toomey, Executive Director, Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments and the Chair of the California Rural Counties Task Force. Sarah Traeger, Rideshare Program Coordinator at the San Luis Obispo Council of Governments. Peter Smith is the Active Transportation Program Coordinator and Regional Planner for Kern County of Governments. Gabriel Gutierrez is a Senior Regional Planner, and he's joined by Bridget Moore, who's a Staff Services Analyst, and they're from the Tulare County of Governments. And then finally, Morgan Barrell, who's a Senior Transportation Planner at Tahoe Region Planning Agency. So thank you to all of our panelists for joining us on the call. Before we start with the presentations, I have a few housekeeping instructions and just some instructions about muting and unmuting the phone. In order to reduce background noise, we've muted all of the participants and panelists. The panelists, when it's time for you to speak, you're going to have to unmute your phone by pressing *6. And that also goes for those that are looking to ask questions after, when we get to that section. Then we're respectfully asking that you, once you've made your comment, is to remute yourself again. If you want to, and that you do that by pressing #6. If you want to ask a question to the panel or make a sorry, it's *6, not #6. Yes, so *6. If you want to ask a question of the panel or make a comment, please first announce yourself and include what organization you represent. And then finally, this teleconference is being recorded and will subsequently be posted on the Active Transportation Resource Center website, which is www.caatpresources.org. All right, so that was the intro and housekeeping. We are at about 10:35. Our next section is going to be our panelist introductions and presentations. We'll take the next 40 minutes to do this, and each presenter will have approximately 5 minutes to introduce themselves and share their organization's services, resources, initiatives that support non-infrastructure efforts. All right, and at this point, I'd like to ask that Bridget unmute herself, and Gabriel, if you're joining her, and take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Victoria. My name is Gabriel Gutierrez. I'm an Associate Regional Planner with Tulare County Association of Governments. Here at TCAG, my primary responsibilities include coordination of the Federal Transportation Improvement Program and also coordination of the ATP program here in TCAG. We have an active transportation advisory committee, a board that meets once a month. It's comprised of representatives from incorporated cities, the county, public health, law enforcement, Caltrans, and the public in general. Through this committee, we discuss non-motorized transportation issues in the county, bicycle and pedestrian accident statistics, bike safety, safe routes to school, education, and other public outreach. We also have adopted a regional active transportation plan here at the county in 2016. The plan looks at benefits of active transportation, public health data, socioeconomic data, needs assessment, and it also describes each of the agency's priority projects. Here to talk a little bit more about our non-infrastructure efforts at the county is my colleague, Bridget Moore.
My name is Bridget Moore. I'm Staff Services Analyst for TCAG. I do primarily public outreach. We have a program called Bike in Stride, which originally started with a grant through Caltrans to promote active transportation. With this, we were able to target disadvantaged communities, schools, after-school programs, and community events. We did this partnering with local law enforcement, different bike clubs, bike shops, and nonprofit organizations, and even rail safety nonprofit organizations. And through this, we were able to not only promote active transportation in these communities, but also promote safety, and we were able to give out several hundred bike helmets and different safety items and promote different safety concepts. And we found that the kids were able to retain the information that we were giving them as a result of our outreach efforts and our games that we had to help them remember these concepts and to remember that it's healthy for their air quality and for their community to use active transportation. With this, we did bike safety helmet demonstrations where we dropped melons and demonstrated why it's important to wear a helmet. And we also had, every year we've had an air quality art contest where we have students draw how they use active transportation and how they can spare the air. And the winners are awarded a bike and a bike helmet. So this has been also an effective way for us to promote active transportation. And with that, we usually have 300 to 700 participants of school-age children submitting their artwork for that particular contest.
All right, thanks so much for kicking us off, Gabriel and Bridget. We're going to go right to the next presentation, and Sarah?
Hi guys, my name's Sarah Trauger. Can you hear me?
We can, thanks.
Okay, I'm the Rideshare Program Coordinator at the San Luis Obispo Council of Governments, or SLOCOG. Rideshare is a division of SLOCOG made up of 4 of us devoted to transportation demand management. One of our transportation demand management programs is an education and encouragement non-infrastructure Safe Routes to School program funded by an Active Transportation Cycle 2 grant. The funding is used for a variety of education and encouragement activities, including on-bike education in 3 schools that serve regionally defined disadvantaged schools. We contract with a local nonprofit known by Bikeability County, and they customize the Technical Assistant Resource Center's California Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Curriculum for grades 4 and 5, along with the League of American Bicyclists curriculum to teach on-bike education in the 4th and 5th grade PE classes at the 3 disadvantaged schools. Bikeability County procured 30 bikes and a trailer as part of an in-kind match for our grant, and that helps keep our costs low. And the bikes travel from school to school in Bikeability County's trailer. A huge benefit of having them as our contractor is having them be able to maintain the bikes easily. The grant also provides for funding for walkability and bikeability audits that we're in the midst of completing now. These will yield walkability and bikeability maps for each school that provide the most safe routes to school by biking, walking, and carpooling or school pooling. Our major encouragement efforts are done by walk to school days, bike to school days, and bike rodeos. We host event days by having a contact person at each school, either a parent, a teacher, faculty, or administrator, who we can push out the information to, and they can organize and promote the day on their own and get the participant numbers or counts back to me. Lastly, as the program coordinator or manager, I chair our quarterly Safe Routes to School task force meetings, which sound similar to the previous speakers. Our task force is made up of individuals from regional transportation, like myself and the others in my office, the school district, local planning, regional health, and law enforcement. Having these quarterly meetings allows the top-level stakeholders to discuss both infrastructure and non-infrastructure programs, and they allow our programs to become more succinct. The Public Health Department runs an Office of Traffic Safety grant, so it's a really great place that we can differentiate our own programs and have them better planned and have more strategic oversight. And just because this task force meets and talks about what they're doing, there's reduced duplication of efforts and increased access to resources which would otherwise be unknown. And then I thought I would also mention that our program is going to continue. Our current Cycle 2 grant is coming in 2019, but we were just told that we were going to be awarded ATP augmentation dollars for Cycle 3, and the on-bike education program will continue with those dollars. And instead of just 3 schools, hopefully our contractor, Bikeability County, will still be with us, and they will be at 10 different schools, and at those 10 schools, there will be a train-the-trainer sort of program where PE teachers from other schools could also learn how to teach on bike education while Bikeability County teaches the 10 schools that they'll be funded to teach. So that's all for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a great overview of what you're working on. And we'll just move right ahead into the next presentation. Dan?
Yeah, hi, this is Dan. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Once again, this is Dan Wayne, Senior Planner up at Shasta Regional Transportation Agency, or CERTA, if I say that. That's referring to the same agency. Been up here for about the last 11 years, and prior to this, I was at Washington State Department of Transportation, and then prior to that, down at Calaveras Council of Governments. So nearly all of my experience has been at the rural and small urban level, and that's the area that I'm most familiar with, the challenges and the opportunities in these areas. In our region, each partner has limited financial resources and manpower and organizational purview to help realize an effective, safe, and appealing active transportation environment. And this is true in all regions, but it's particularly so in rural areas. And because of this, it's vitally important for us that we partner and not overlap each other's efforts, and that every organization operates within the zone where they can be most effective. So we build good relationships with each agency, with community organizations and individual stakeholders, and then we collectively help each other to be successful within each partner's wheelhouse. We also coordinate to strategically layer complementary efforts in order to get that critical mass and intensity of factors required for active transportation to be a truly viable and competitive mobility choice. And I think in our region it works because we've spent a lot of time over the years investing in developing these, for lack of a better term, symbiotic relationships with these organizations and stakeholders in our region. And we're also very fortunate to have some extremely engaged partners, including our county public health department. We have a diverse consortium of stakeholders called Healthy Shasta, and an organization called Shasta Living Streets that we really lean on heavily and that have worked very well with us over a number of projects over the years. So with regard to non-infrastructure active transportation, I'd say we're a little bit more of a background player. Our wheelhouse is planning and cultivating specific projects and programs to receive funding, and also where there happen to be some gaps that come up that local agencies and community organizations have, we're often uniquely able to fill those gaps. A few examples of some of the activities that we're currently involved in that's in our wheelhouse that suits what we do and what our resources are and what our purview is we're preparing a regional multi-jurisdictional active transportation plan. We're developing a procurement program for active transportation amenities that local agencies can piggyback on to streamline the process. We procure technical services for the development of specific active transportation programs and projects so we can help get grant funds and then bring technical services on board that local agencies or community organizations wouldn't otherwise have access to. We're also developing an active transportation data collection program that'll include some conventional methods, but also some crowdsourcing using some GPS-enabled devices. And so those are just a few of the support activities that we do, and then we, like I said, we help other organizations that are better equipped to do some of the non-infrastructure programs to administer those. We really help them shine, and then they help us out in return when we're doing planning and working on specific projects. When it comes to active transportation in rural and small urban areas such as Shasta, our biggest challenge really is too little resources spread thin over a large area. So there's what it means in practical terms is there's not enough continuity and measurable performance benefits when you spread things out like that. One of our biggest downfalls in regions like ours is constantly being busy doing good work but never really achieving the larger goals such as mode shift. In a region like ours, we have to be really selective on where our attention goes and be laser focused on programs and projects that yield measurable results. And so I can go into more detail and specifics during the Q&A, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of big picture perspective on how we administer and handle non-infrastructure projects in the Shasta region.
That was really great, Dan. Thank you so much for sharing. And just to move us along, I'm going to hand it over to Stephen next. Stephen?
Hi, Stephen Hanamaikai here with Stanislaus Council of Governments. StanCog was awarded an active transportation program Cycle 3 grant for bike ped education and safety campaign. It was through our participation in some of the neighborhood walk assessments and other transit assessments that StanCog performs that we found communities were taking it upon themselves to come up with solutions to improve the walking and biking conditions in their neighborhood. And Also, there was a specific focus on active transportation projects coming from the local jurisdictions. And for STANCOG, our role in the active transportation program has been somewhat limited, but we saw that there were a lot of good things going on at the local level, both in the planning and infrastructure realms, and we wanted to do something to help and build upon all this good work that was being done. So we floated a few ideas through our Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee and as well as our other bike ped stakeholders, and decided on an approach to approach it from the education / encouragement / evaluation and planning perspective. Ultimately, we came up with this safety education and maintenance training campaign that will include bike ped safety-centric advertising campaign in corridors known to have high rates of bike ped collisions, the specific focus on disadvantaged communities where the majority of the bike ped collisions in the county occur. And there will also be several open streets events that will include bike rodeos and basic bicycle maintenance training. The bike rodeos will be taught by local bike club members who are league certified instructors through the League of American Cyclists, and the bike maintenance and repair training program will be partnered with a nonprofit who has started it's a bike co-op of sorts and an after-school bike program. And then finally, we'll have a safety workshop, bike ped safety workshop, with the data that we were able to collect prior to the campaign and the observations that will be made prior to the campaign. The idea is to develop a workshop to provide local decision makers with additional resources to help them plan and implement bike strategies and pedestrian strategies that help improve the overall usage and viability of those as modes of transportation. There are a lot of moving parts, but the overall goal of the campaign is to reduce or remove some of those real and perceived barriers that make biking and walking less appealing, and to promote biking as viable forms of transportation to a wide spectrum of people, not necessarily just the recreational weekend cyclists or the people that have to bike. And yeah, that's where we are.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. And I'm actually realizing that we're doing really well on time, so I just wanted to, before we move on to the next presentation, just kind of take a pause. I know that we're hearing a lot from each of these regions, and panelists have been asked to share links to plans and things like that they've done in service of their active transportation efforts with us, so that we can get that all out to all the participants on the call in a subsequent email at the end of this teleconference. Thank you, Stephen. That was really wonderful. Carrie, we're going to turn it over to you next. Are you there?
I'm here. I think I did it right. Okay. Hi, everybody. So my name is Carrie McNichol, and I am in a program called DIBS that's part of the San Joaquin Council of Governments. And we also work with the Stanislaus Council of Governments, as well as down in Merced County with their Association of Governments as well. And my role, generally speaking, at our agency is in transportation demand management. We're in the TDM function. But it's a little bit unique. So SJCOG's, there's kind of a regional and a local and then a hyper-local focus to sort of what I do here. So regionally, SJCOG hasn't really been very hands-on in active transportation program grant work as far as implementing it. We serve, kind of as the conduit for our local agencies. But we do have a couple unique things that we've been able to do, one of which is providing technical assistance to our local agencies, either through ourselves or by creating kind of a consultant pot for them to pick from. So we sort of pre-approved consultants that they could use to help with their initial round of grant applications way back in ATP Cycle 1, and many of them were really successful through that. We are also fortunate in that we have a local sales tax measure, Measure K, which we are now doing a call for projects for bicycle, pedestrian, and safe routes to school programs. And we've been able to leverage that for ATP funding as well. So then in my exact program, the DIBS program, we focus on encouraging active transportation as a commute option, so to replace drive-alone trips. So we do some work with the schools as well, but most of what we do is try to support active commutes. So we have toolkits that we create and sort of a custom consulting program that we do for employers. We also try to work to recruit champions at those work sites. There's only 4 people on our team, and we cover a 3-county area, so we always want to do what we can to empower other groups. So we try to build champions. We have a really robust trip planning program that shows people all of their safe bicycling routes pulled from OpenStreetMaps. And then we also support several local events. So we do an active, a very involved Bike Month campaign, which while mostly focused on the Bike to Work efforts, we've also started supplementing that with a school focus. And then we also support local events. I'm also involved with our local bicycling coalition, who really serve that encouragement role. So it kind of comes full circle in that the Bike Coalition, the MPO supports the DIBS program, which works with the Bike Coalition, which supports, from the advocacy side, those agencies that are funded at the regional level. So it ends up being kind of a nice triangle of efforts. So we provide, through the Bike Coalition, a lot of support on the encouragement side, and for those cities that are funded through the ATP grants, whether that's letters of support, whether that's helping them put on local events, providing kind of on-the-ground insight into what they should do when they apply for those funding pots through the MPO. And then we've been able to kind of synergize all of those things together for several local events. We do a Bike Fest, which is a big free community event that the MPO has sponsored, and it's a free educational event where we've partnered with the local grant recipients of Safe Routes to School, as well as just trying to show people how to get around by biking or walking through the community. And there's bands and food trucks and live music and beer garden and all kinds of fun stuff too. So we found a nice kind of synergy between these areas, from the big kind of sky-high regional view, and then the more business side with the DIBS program and the commuter services, and then on the sort of really local, on the actually, boots on the ground level with the Bicycle Coalition. So that's definitely something that I think has worked well for us, and that we each recognize in each role sort of what the limitations are of each agency, each group, and we're able to kind of backfill and supplement for each other in that way, which has really helped us with promoting some of those non-infrastructure measures. Our cities are really good at building things, but not so good at the encouragement and education side. So it's been a nice synergy, I think, for our agency and our local programs as well.
All right, Carrie, thank you so much. That was great. Mara, we have you up next.
Great. This is Mara Toomey. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, which is the MPO for Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito counties. Prior to being at AMBAG, I was a Deputy Director for Project Delivery at the California Transportation Commission, so I've seen the project sort of from 2 different perspectives. AMBAG is a little different in how it approaches ATP and its role within the region as compared to some of the prior speakers. In our region, we have 3 county-wide RTPAs, which are more focused on the implementation and many of the support programs, similar to what the other panelists have discussed. AMBAG's role is primarily as a funder, a facilitator, and a technical assistance provider for the ATP program and related programs. And to this point, one of our major things is in the last few years, we had funded a region-wide complete streets guidebook for the 3 counties, and that was completed in 2014. And this provides a foundation for ATP projects throughout the region and hopefully providing a better system-wide approach and some consistency in the projects that we plan and implement throughout the region. One of the other things that we are looking forward to is the fact that under SB1, the MPOs will receive some amount of planning funds to use at their discretion. And we see this as a prime tool to help our local jurisdictions who don't currently have ATP plans. We're going to try and help them fund those plans in the future as these funds become available, which will be a huge benefit because, particularly going forward, the Commission is looking forward to not funding projects for jurisdictions that don't have a formal biped plan of some sort. The other thing that AMBAG does that I think is very important is we provide technical assistance to our jurisdictions who are preparing applications for the ATP program and the competitive program. We are happy to review their proposed application, provide technical assistance. We often provide data to be used in the application, and we help them wherever they need to get through the process. If they're successful in obtaining a grant, we're also available to help them work through the remainder of the funding program, because it doesn't just end with the award. It's actually sometimes a complicated process moving forward through the actual implementation of the project. And in my role as the chair of the Rural Counties Task Force, I would say my main role is to act as an advocate for rural counties and the ATP program and the policies and the procedures that are being implemented at the state level. In many of the conversations for any program, but in particular ATP, which often has a very urban focus, it's important to have that voice at the table that represents the views and needs and priorities of more rural communities in our state. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mara. Appreciate it. That was great. And we did, during our planning call, say that Mara might get some follow-up calls from rural communities as a result of this. And so just as a heads up, we will be in a follow-up correspondence to everyone on this call, be sharing each of the presenters' emails as email contact information so that you can also reach out to them with questions. Our next presenter is Peter. Peter?
Can you hear me?
We can. Great. Thank you.
Good. My name is Pete Smith. I work for the Kern Council of Governments down here in Bakersfield. We administer the active transportation program as well as several other bike and pedestrian related programs. For the non-infrastructure, for some of the communities we fund what they call them bicycle rodeos, where they pass out helmets, give educational literature. One of the favorite things that I like to do at the bike rodeos is have the bike race with the policemen. So we usually set up a kind of a race course, and the cops will race with the kids in the program. We also fund bicycle parking and, as I've already mentioned, bicycle safety programs. We've started to get into the bike sharing program a little bit, although we, meaning the COG, is sort of peripherally involved at this point. We've also funded a Build-A-Bike program, and we have supported a local nonprofit bicycle advocacy group. During the ATP Cycle 2 awards, we were awarded money to develop a countywide active transportation program. I'm anticipating that the final document will be released next week, September 22nd. We'll then begin to start going around the county to try to get it accepted by the member jurisdictions. The active transportation plan, I think I bit off a little more than I can chew. I envisioned it as more of a technical study to try to get my arms around how much actual infrastructure is needed. But we're kind of getting into how the projects are ranked and quantitative, qualitative. So we have some issues to resolve with that. And in my jurisdiction, I have a lot of different geographies and populations in that our county spans the Central Valley, the Southern Sierra Nevada, and also the Mojave Desert. So there's 3 different kinds of climates that we have to deal with and 3 different kind of populations that we're trying to accommodate. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're doing down here.
Great, thank you, Pete, for sharing. And we have our last panelist with her introductory presentation, Morgan.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, thanks.
Great. Well, I have the blessing of being last, which means that almost all the other panelists have talked about things that we're also doing. So I'm going to try to talk about a couple of different things, but I apologize if I'm being duplicative. So we haven't actually received any active transportation program non-infrastructure grants, but we have received infrastructure grants, and I think that is largely because of the non-infrastructure planning and education and awareness that we support through our programming. So I'll talk a little bit about that. The first one was called our On Our Way grant program. We supplied funds to local jurisdictions, nonprofits, and school districts to basically plan and produce active transportation program grants. One example of that was the South Tahoe Middle School Area Connectivity Plan. It was a very robust planning exercise with a lot of participation, a lot of data analysis. About 6 to 8 projects came out of that plan, and one of those projects moved forward and is now funded fully through ATP. So it hits safe routes to school, it hits connectivity and closing gaps in our infrastructure and safety. So that's one of the, I think, really successful things that we've done in supporting infrastructure through non-infrastructure programming. The next one is bike share. So Peter talked a little bit about that. We're kind of in the same place as them in that we didn't bring bike share here, but we have actively been supporting our partners. First, we started by just getting a bunch of our local stakeholders together to talk about whether or not they're interested in bike share. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Tahoe region, we are a bi-state agency between Nevada and California. We have a huge lake in the middle. We have North and South Shore. So sometimes getting everyone all on the same page can be a bit of an effort. So we really take the role of convener and collaborator so that these conversations are had. So anyway, we brought folks together and we found out that in Truckee they were already starting a bike share program. They went with a more traditional model. They used Zagster. And then down on the South Shore, the League to Save Lake Tahoe sponsored bringing Lime Bike to the South Shore, which is a dockless program, very different from the Zagster station model. So we've been very supportive in basically connecting all of our partners so everyone knows who's doing what, so that as we move forward, perhaps we can create a regional bike share program. And then we've also just been really supportive down on the South Shore of the League to Save Lake Tahoe and Lime Bike. We helped coordinate a lot of meetings with our local jurisdiction, the police department, the community development department, bike shops, basically anyone we wanted to make sure was on board and understood what was going on. And, just on the bike share front, on the, the benefits that it's adding, we were really concerned that it would conflict with our bicycle shop rental economy. We are a tourist destination, so we wanted to be really sensitive to that. But what the data is really showing us is, especially with the stockless program, is the average riding distance is about 1 mile. The average ride time is about 8 minutes. And what we're seeing is the really hotspot activity centers are where we're seeing the most ridership, as well as at people's homes. So it really tells the story that people are using the stockless program to get to and from home to work. So it's really helping fix that first last mile issue, which is really prevalent in rural areas, which we are considered a rural area. We don't have a perfect grid where transit is super accessible. You would have to walk, maybe a mile from the transit stop to get home. So just being really supportive of the bike share system has been helpful to have a positive outcome there. The third thing I wanted to talk about is our partnership with the Lake Tahoe Bicycle Coalition by supporting bike and pedestrian awareness. So we have a very strong partnership with the Bike Coalition, and we support a different variety of things. The first one is our interactive bike map. You can check that out at tahoebike.org, and I've also sent the links to be shared. But so we funded the development of that interactive bike map where you can pick your route based on the type of facilities that you would like to use. It also helps us crowdsource material such as, where bike racks are needed or where there's maintenance issues on paths or on roads and that kind of stuff. So great data there and also just a really good tool. We also supported a total revamp of the paper bike map. Although we definitely support technological tools, we also know that lots of folks may not have smartphones or prefer paper to kind of delve deep into where they want to go. And not to mention that, of course, we have a lot of cellular issues at Tahoe. Our service can be very spotty. So having a paper bike map at, hotels and transit facilities and our bike shops is a really important thing. So we've supported that. We also support the Bike Safe Lake Tahoe campaign. It's a lot of media outreach and sort of rules of the road, reminding cyclists to bike single file and not bike the wrong way along the road, while also, encouraging vehicles to, drive the speed limit and keep a lookout for bikes. So we've been very supportive of that bike safety campaign. And then lastly, the bike challenge, and that is definitely a commute type challenge where we encourage folks to bike or walk or use transit to work. To get to work, and we have a place where they can insert their miles, and it spits out and tells them, how many CO2 emissions they've saved, how many calories they've burned, and then all of that information is consolidated, and there's winners at the end. We also incorporate Safe Routes to School programming in that bike challenge. We do lots of rodeos with the police department, as well as big events at the schools where we do education like how to, fix a bike, how to pump up a tire. We do some skills courses. We also incorporate mountain biking skills courses because we do have a big mountain biking culture here. So we focus not only on biking and walking as a mode of transportation, but also as a way for recreation and fun and healthy exercise.
Great, Morgan. There's so much going on there. That concludes our introductory presentations. Thank you all to our panelists. At this point, we're going to turn over to our participant questions and panelist responses and discussions. We're at around 11:15 almost, and so what we're going to do now is go through 4 questions that were previously submitted by our friends in the field from across the state. There were more questions submitted, however, we don't have time to go through them all, and we also do want to be able to open up the phones for dialogue. So participants should feel free to contact any of the panelists after the call and ask them questions directly. We know that there's a lot of specific information that's being shared by each of the panelists in their respective regions, and so if you have more in-depth questions, they're probably the best people to answer those specifics. Let's get to question number 1. The question reads, what types of experiential encouragement and education efforts are being paid for and or supported by MPOs? For example, is there anyone supporting annual open streets events in their downtowns or local active transportation conferences? And I would like to turn it over to Stephen to kick us off, and then maybe hear from Carrie and Morgan as well.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we were awarded during Cycle 3. But I actually failed to mention, since we were awarded during Cycle 3, we won't actually begin work until August of 2019. But the Open Streets events is actually something I'm really excited about. We are going to be putting these in disadvantaged communities throughout the area. And as I mentioned, we'll have the bike rodeo taught by the local bike club members that are league certified instructors, and bike maintenance and repair training that will partner with a nonprofit. And the idea is to kind of find those kids or parents or faculty that can be champions of this bike maintenance and repair training program, where it would end up being a train-the-trainer type approach, so we can have a sustainable model and hopefully be implementing this elsewhere throughout the county. The maintenance training will be offered through the Bike Tools School Maintenance and Repair Clinic through the Bike Park Tool Company. Like I said, we're starting in August 2019, so we're still working out many of the details, but we would, identify those champions to help build this maintenance and repair program, and once those champions are identified, they'll hopefully be part of this traveling open streets event, where they would be able to implement those skills that they learned, and hopefully turn some of those perceptions of parents or kids themselves who see the lack of knowledge of how to fix your chain or to pump up your tires or to adjust your brakes as reasons why they will not bike, and hopefully address those issues through the events at the open street.
Thank you, Stephen. Carrie, you want to jump in? Carrie or Morgan?
Remuted myself, apparently. Sorry. Yeah, so we actually, I mentioned the Bike Fest event that we've supported in the past. We have a couple other things coming up, too, that we're trying to get in the role of kind of supporting and not necessarily facilitating. But one is that this Friday we'll be participating in Parking Day, which, if for anyone who's not familiar, is it happens the third Friday of September every year, and is an effort to take over parking spaces and turn them into public spaces for the day. So we're going to be doing that in partnership with the Bicycle Coalition to take over a few spaces and use them to promote active modes, provide bike parking, and then set up kind of an info booth for people who want to learn about different ways to get around. We'll also be organizing at the end of October sort of a commute con, I guess we're calling it, but that's really business focused. So trying to get our employers, it's called DIPS Day, but trying to get our employers resourced and our businesses locally resourced so that they can provide information to their employees, and it's basically a one-stop shop. So not a traditional open streets event, but again, working to empower other people to kind of carry the active transportation message for us and on our behalf. And then from there, we'll also be doing a overall campaign that's a very basic kind of encouraging people to bike and walk and carpool instead of driving, and helping them be educated enough to make those choices and decisions.
Thanks, Carrie. And just a quick question from that's funded through your TDM program, correct?
Yeah, that's funded through the TDM program we have. And we're funded through CMAQ largely.
Thank you. Perfect. Morgan? Morgan, if you have, if you wanted to jump.
Sorry, I muted myself too. So we don't support really any open streets type events, and we were supporting, something we called the cycle celebration. It was the end of our bike challenge. We worked together with a bike coalition to bring lots of vendors, and we had, bike raffles, and I actually won a bike at one of those raffles. I felt kind of bad about that, but I love the bike. But the truth is that you know, we weren't getting enough participation at these sort of bigger events, and so we've really kind of cut down on that, and we're really focusing on doing events at schools during the school day. So we're using most of our dollars and our energy and our time really getting to our students to teach, you know, how to bike and walk safely, and also, you know, get them on their bikes and learn how to bike so that we can encourage, you know, a new generation of people to walk, bike, and use transit.
Okay, thank you so much, Morgan. Thank you, panelists. At this point, I'd like to unmute the phone lines for any comments or follow-up questions to our first question.
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
If there's someone who wants to jump in and ask a question, this is a great time to do so. I know I should give it a second break to see if somebody's on the call that wants to speak up. Do we have anyone who wants to make a comment?
Hi, this is Norma O'Connell. I'm here from Sunnyvale Safe Routes to School. It's a new program here. I'm just getting started taking over for public health to promote sustainability with our program. So I was just curious, Morgan, do you have any examples of what you do as far as education for the students?
Sure, happy to do that. So we focus on two different things. We do winter in-classroom education series, and we do it for 2nd, 4th, and 6th grades. And there's sort of a team of us that does it, some different staff from TRPA, and we also rely on some of our advocacy groups like the Lake Tahoe Bicycle Coalition and also the Community Mobility Group. And we do lots of different exercises. I'd be happy to send you some resources if you want to email me. My email is mberyl, B-E-R-Y-L, @trpa.org. So we do that in the winter, that in-house, in-classroom education, and it really focuses on rules of the road and safety. And then in, you know, the beginning of the summer, you know, in June before they're out of school, that's when we hit on more skills learning. So this year, you know, we did a 3-day bike to school challenge where we encourage students and teachers to bike to school. We do, we organize, you know, I forget what they're called, but the buses where, you know, a bike bus where we have a teacher on both sides and the students on the inside of the bike bus, and they bike to school together. We have volunteers stationed at each school, and we provide prizes such as bike bells, bike lights, and reflective slap bracelets. The kids love those. The students don't love those as much. And then
to the question, I do not.
Okay. Do we want to have that person use their phone?
Yeah, and I think what we're
it's both directions.
all for the disruptions in the background. We are probably going to switch up for the next question. Morgan, I might have you wrap this one up. And then what we're going to do is remove the phones, and if somebody needs to ask a question, we're going to just ask that individual to *6. I think it's just too many people in the background to kind of have unmuted. So sorry about the disruption. Morgan, if you want to just kind of wrap that up, and then we'll ask our next question.
Yeah, so we do that 3-day thing with the prizes, and we tally everybody up. And then we ended with a big event. We only did it at the middle school. We had multiple stations, and we did mountain bike skills courses. We did just a typical bicycle rodeo, and we had a fix-it repair station where we taught kids how to repair their bikes. And we also had trivia and prizes like water bottles and helmets and bike locks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I'm sorry, can I just get your email address one more time to make sure I got it correctly?
Yeah, we're going to be sending the email addresses out to all of the
that's right, you did mention
and
that.
we're going to move on to the next question in the interest of time. But thank you for the question from Sunnyvale. And I just want to reflect back on the question that was asked earlier about MPOs supporting open street events in downtowns and including local active transportation conferences. And thank you to Stephen for responding back to that. And we also do know that there's an active effort coming out of the Southern California Association of Governments, and we had Ryberg from SCAG actually share in our related teleconference earlier this summer about SCAG's initiative, the Go Human campaign, and a lot of the open street and demonstration projects that are being funded directly through the Active program. All right, so we're going to mute the phones and move forward with some of these additional questions that we've received. Thanks.
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
All right. Thanks again. Here we are with our second question. Are any MPOs supporting local data-driven enforcement programs that specifically target driver behavior, for example, speeding and right hooks at intersections? I have responses from Bridget and Dan. So, Bridget, do you want to start us off? You'll need to *6 your phone so that we can hear you, Bridget. Okay. Apologize for the lull. Dan, if you're able to respond.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Dan.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we, as well as any other MPO, we're not an enforcement agency, so that's not really what our role is. But obviously, in terms of data, we can partner with public safety to accomplish that. We have limited data, and I think most regions have the same issue with regard to active transportation. We're trying to change that. We are in a process now of doing a procurement for a travel data collection program. We're going to incorporate into the scope of work of that active transportation, usage counts and so forth. So we'll have a regular program that will feed into the larger enforcement and planning efforts and so forth. And then I mentioned before the idea of crowdsourcing, and I think that's really where the biggest opportunity lies with new technology to take advantage of that, and we can support the development of those technical tools. And then we need organizations within the community to really step up and to be part of helping to generate the data that goes into those programs. And so we work with them, and again, just reiterating before, we focus our resources on developing like the tools and providing funding, and then we really rely on the other stakeholders to help us implement those types of things and to make some measurable difference.
Great, thank you, Dan. Bridget, if you're able to weigh in. Are you there? So at this point, I'm going to ask if there are any individuals on the call that have any follow-up questions to this question about local data-driven enforcement programs. If you want to unmute your phone by pressing *6, please introduce yourself, your organization, and ask your question. Really appreciate everyone's flexibility with the technology.
This is Morgan, and just because it doesn't seem like there's questions, I just wanted to add, one of the things that we do for enforcement is we've been working with our local police to do some targeted enforcement right around the schools when school first opens. So, in the fall, they'll go and kind of hang out during school pickup and drop off and not ticket people, but pull folks over who are doing illegal movements, who are speeding in the school zone, and just give them warnings and remind them that they are in a school zone. So that's one of the ways that we work with our police department to do some targeted enforcement.
Appreciate that, Morgan. And if there's any other panelists that would like to weigh in, this is your opportunity to do so.
Hi, this is Stephen with Stancock. I actually got a question for Morgan. How exactly are you funding that partnership with the local law enforcement, or is funding not an issue?
Yeah, well, they did have some OTS funding there for a while, and they typically use that for like bicycle rodeos and helmets and things like that. But no, our last OTS funding request was not funded, but the police department's still committed to providing that service for us.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
That was very helpful. Thank you both for that addition. All right. If we have no additional questions related to MPO's support of local enforcement efforts that target driver behavior and that impact on pedestrian and bicycle safety, I would like to move us forward to the next question, which is what new forms of public-private partnerships are the MPOs engaged in, and with what types of programs? And then the follow-up question is, what are the types of organizations and businesses that you're working with? I'd like to ask Dan to start us off, and then I know that Sarah and Morgan are also interested in answering this question. Dan, if you want to star 6.
And make sure your own phone is unmuted.
All right, Sarah?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Dan. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Technical difficulties, but in terms of public-private partnerships that we're engaged with, right now those are primarily revolved around competing for affordable housing sustainable communities grants. We were successful in the last round, and we're working on another project for this upcoming cycle. And the focus is on really complete package projects where you're not just focusing on active transportation, but you're incorporating that into the idea of land use and connections to public transit and all the other aspects that really give people good reason to switch modes. And so as part of those projects, we'll work with the city and with the developer on a specific project and with a local philanthropic organization to come up with these projects. And we do that by making technical assistance funds available. And we do call for projects, and we'll provide close to $200,000 in cash towards technical assistance to develop these projects and the programs and everything that's required to make a competitive grant application. And some of those ideas might include, for example, incorporating into the scope the idea of a bike depot or multiple bike depots where bike rentals and potentially bike share is available, and also making residents in programs where residents of these affordable housing units have access or discounted or free access to these rental or bike share bicycles and to transit, public transit, and so forth. So combined all together and coordinating with other partners, we're able to put together these complete package projects.
Great, thank you, Dan. Other panelists?
Hi, this is Sarah from FlowCog. So my partnership is rather more like the nonprofit type of partnership. And I said previously, but I'll reiterate and go a little more in detail, is that a lot of our on-bike and in-the-school work is actually done by Bikes Flow County, which is a nonprofit that happens to be located very close to our office, which allows us to work really closely. And they do a lot of the all of the on-bike education in schools. So the 3 schools that are regionally disadvantaged or regionally defined as disadvantaged receive the on-bike education from League Cycling Instructors, or LCIs, which is certified by the League of American Bicyclists, and they teach the 4th and 5th graders on bike education. They also help out immensely in getting walk and bike to school days organized, and just are super beneficial with their, I mean, they are everywhere in the community. So together, not only do we know our community members, but they know even more of them. So together, it seems like we just create a more succinct and you know, full coverage program. So yeah, thanks.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And Morgan, I have you down.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You know, I think they kind of covered it, so if you want to open it up for questions,
okay.
I think that's probably good.
Perfect, yeah. All right, so if there are questions related to this one that we've just asked, which is about public-private partnerships that the MPOs are engaged in, if you are one of our attendees and you'd like to ask a follow-up question, this is an opportunity to do so. Please press #6, sorry, to unmute your phone and ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
This is Loretta Ellard with the Mendocino Council of Governments. I heard several speakers refer to partnering with the local bicycle commission or nonprofit groups. I'm wondering if when that was done, did you go through a formal procurement process to get them on board, or did you deal sole source? And the reason I'm asking is we had a large non-infrastructure grant in our county, and we had to go through a couple of RFP processes to make sure that we did the proper method of getting someone on board. So that's my question.
Hi, this is Sarah from SlowCog. Can you hear me?
We can, Sarah.
Okay, great. So we actually also had to go through the RFP process, not because of our funding source, but because of our in-house procurement policies. If you listen to the previous recording of this, the previous webinar to this one, there was a gentleman, I believe he was from Northern California, and he was able to bypass the RFP process, and you might have to go back and actually listen to that webinar to find out, but we also had to go through the RFP process. We had one other bidder, which just was not as, yeah, we had an independent panel review, and the independent panel chose Bikefield County, so that's what we got. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. And this is Victoria from the ATRC, and Sarah spoke about Ken the Cow shared from Metropolitan Transportation Commission, the MTC region, that in some cases that a public interest finding can be utilized in lieu of a more rigorous RFP process, but that is something that you'll need to consult with local Caltrans local assistance about. But there are different processes that can be utilized for that effort. But yeah, so it's a very long, robust process, and we appreciate that question. And I just want to also let folks on the phone know that Loretta did share some other questions that were specific to the delivery of non-infrastructure projects under the ATP program, and we have those questions, and those are questions that are really probably best answered by our colleagues at Caltrans, and so we'll be following up, but not on this call.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Anyone else, if they're interested in kind of piggybacking on this question that looks at public-private partnerships and the types of organizations and businesses, please go ahead and unmute your phones and ask your questions. Hello? All right. So hearing none, I am going to move us forward, and we have one more question. Please submit a question, and that is focused on what do active transportation efforts in urban and rural settings have in common? what, if any, differences exist between active transportation potential and efforts in rural and urban areas? So, Sarah, I have you kicking us off, and then Dan as well.
Hi, this is Sarah. Please let Dan go first. I forgot where my notes are.
Dan, are you able to join us? And I'll just, as Dan unmutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry, there's a little delay every time we want to mute. And
I realize that. Thanks again for the flexibility.
Yeah, no problem. So let's see. The question was,
what do active transportation efforts in urban and rural settings have in common? And so we understand that most of the panelists are coming from a rural perspective, but really it's that overlap with that we're hoping that you can comment on.
Yeah, I mean the main challenge, I've alluded to it before, was just that you need to have that critical mass and intensity of factors to really make active transportation a viable alternative. And so what that requires you to do is to be more geographically selective in where you allocate your resources, and to really partner to make things happen. And that's an experimental process. I mean, we've tried doing incentive programs, tried doing call for projects to see what we get, and maybe we're not satisfied with those. We try to do offer incentive funds and do a competitive process so that different community organizations and we ask private for-profit or nonprofit organizations to partner with a local agency to bring their best idea to us to help us fund and to develop a new program or a project. And it just really requires some creativity and some experimentation, and constantly going back to your referencing whatever plan that you have regionally to make sure that you're putting your resources exactly where it's needed to make the biggest impact.
That's words of wisdom. I appreciate that, Dan. And we do know from all of the presentations that were happening, and also from the previous teleconference, that there are many regional plans that have been set already and in place that that serve as that guidepost that you can come and go from, and with your experimentation and that creativity in terms of figuring out what works for your specific region. Sarah, have you found your notes? Are you ready to?
Yes, I recall at least half of my response to this question. And it is on the fact of working in a rural community or a smaller community. Again, my contractor works 3 blocks away from me, and they work in the schools already, and with or without the funding that we provide them and contract with them. And because what I was saying when we were prepping for this was that when they go out to schools, they know most of the people, and it's very, it's a small community, so there's a sense of community as well. And with that, it's easy to, oh, there's a walk to school day, or, oh, there's a bike to school day or bike rodeo. And to get the community involved seems not that difficult. And maybe it's not because of, I don't know whether it's because of my predecessors to me stepping into this position, or it's a small community. But I've spoken with individuals from larger communities that have said, working in a small community would be such a blessing because of the way that you can start a grassroots movement and, get it going. Although we don't just, attack the issue from a grassroots sort of movement, it started in the schools with walk and bike to school days, but we also attack from the task force perspective and getting the high level regional transportation planners, and we get the school district and the local planning and regional health and law enforcement all, you know, we're attacking, you know, active transportation from both ends. So whether or not it's a rural issue or not, I think at least having a small community helps each other know each other, and when I do call a task force meeting, I get a good representation from everyone because it's not that difficult to get together.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah. I'm actually going to open that up to other panelists as well, if they have more insight to share. Again, the question is, what do active transportation have in urban and rural settings have in common? We have touched upon it, but if there are any parting words for this particular question that you'd like to share, panelists, that would be great. And I'll give it about 5 seconds in case there's a delay. And hearing nothing, I'm actually going to ask that our audience, if you have any follow-up questions or comments to this question, now is the time to unmute yourself by pressing *6 and asking your question. Hello? Is there a question from the field coming in right now? Okay. Hearing nothing at this point, I am actually, we have wonderfully about 15 minutes left until the end of our teleconference time. I'm going to encourage anyone who's on the call right now, since we have this added time, and if you have any questions for our panelists, comments about what you've heard today, if you're interested in sharing a little bit of what you're working on in the region that you're from, if you'd like to use that, we have a little bit of time for those kinds of comments. Please *6 yourself if you'd like to share.
Hello, I'm Lindell Price, and I'm involved with the El Dorado County Commission on Aging. We have our county has a very high percentage of aging population, and a lot of the advocacy around active transportation and orientation in the county is toward recreation. But we don't have attention to things like pedestrian access to transit stops and things of a more practical impact on our aging population. And I'm wondering, I would like any additional information on how those issues are being addressed in other locations, especially rural locations.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindell. We appreciate the question. And I will open that up to all of our panelists. So Lindell's question had to do with active aging and promotion of active transportation beyond recreation for utilitarian purposes and the connect-ups to transit. If there's anyone who wants to start that conversation, please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Dan up in Shasta. I'm actually going to give an example of something that I heard at a recent another meeting I was at, where we had a presentation from Southern California Association of Governments, where they are doing where they do transit projects, for example. They are no longer doing just transit projects. They're doing package projects that require that area to include in the scope of work the active transportation connections to that transit station or train station and so forth. And so I guess to sort of answer that question, I think making sure that when you're working on projects, you're not looking at them in a vacuum, that you're including all of the aspects and making a true complete package project.
Thanks, Dan. And I'll just make a plug for the Active Transportation Resource Center. As you know, we are tasked with providing webinars and teleconferences on a monthly basis on timely topics that are relevant to the field that come in based on the requests and for more information. And one of the topics that we are exploring is the first and last mile connect-ups to transit, different potentials, different models, different case studies, and so that is something that we are looking to share based on what's happening here in California in 2018. So thank you, Lindell, for your question. Thank you, Dan, for reminding us of some of the work that's happening down in the Southern California region. Other panelists?
Hello, this is Mara from AMBAG.
Great.
And I wanted to mention that we applied and received for a grant from the Strategic Growth Council, and it was also partially a Caltrans grant, where we set up a rural task force for the more rural areas of our county. And the main focus of this was, transit accessibility and looking at those first and last mile, or in rural communities is often multi-mile, those last points of connection, and how we could link these transit needs with, our ATP program as well. And what I thought was really an important aspect of it is we really, the task force was not of the usual members. It was a lot of community members in our really smaller jurisdictions or more very isolated communities. And it was very helpful to get their input, and we've used that as a source of information for our current MTP SCF.
All right. Mara, I'm just going to ask you to say that whole entire acronym again, because I know you're so for
well, and for statewide purposes, our Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy that will be adopted next year.
Very good. Thank you. Other panelists wanting to speak to both the active aging part of Dale's question and connect ups with transit? I think some of the presentations did cover that a little bit earlier. So,
hi, this is Sarah from SLOCOG.
Hi, Sarah.
So the other program that I manage is a mobility management program by the federal, like an FTA 5310 grant. And what I do for that is provide specialized transportation information for seniors and individuals with disabilities. So within that, we can both travel train individuals as well as just provide them with the information they need, whether it be walking them through it on the phone or, like I said, travel training them and actually going to their house and getting on the bus with them. Additionally, we have something called Dial-A-Ride here. So if you live in any of the cities, we have in Atascadero, Morro Bay, Napomo, those are like different cities in our area that have Dial-A-Rides that will take the individual from their home to the regional bus route, and that kind of takes care of that first mile, last mile sort of thing. Although I will say that it's not foolproof. We do have a very large area that our county covers, and if you don't live within the city boundaries, the Dial-A-Ride won't go to your house. So we're working on that, and yeah, that's it.
And do we have any other comments to Lindell's question? Right, I'm keeping tabs on time, and by my watch, we are almost out of time. So at this point, I would like to wrap us up and offer some reminders first off, I want to say a big thank you to all of our panelists today. I thought they were really wonderful. They shared a lot of information. We at the ATRC are going to work with these recordings and try to chunk out what we've discussed and figure out new ways to disseminate this information. So at least from the Resource Center, we have more to share with you about what's happening regionally around the state. We want to thank our participants for being on the call and asking questions. Please know that we will be sending out an email following this teleconference asking you to provide feedback to us about this training opportunity. It's a Survey Gizmo evaluation, and we'll send that out along with any of the links to different resources that were discussed by our panelists that were shared with us. This teleconference recording will be posted on the Active Transportation Resource Center website. Again, that's www.catpresources.org. And one last reminder that we will be sending out contact information for the panelists after this call. So if you have any additional burning questions that you weren't able to ask today, know that they will be available to talk about the specifics of their work after this call. So a little bit about what's ahead. As I mentioned, we do additional webinars and teleconferences. Please be on the lookout for our next two teleconferences and webinar trainings. One is going to focus specifically on crossing guard resources, and we're going to be sharing some information from different communities that are using tools from the Active Transportation Resource Center and implementing them in the field, and so they're going to be speaking about the success and challenges of those efforts. That's slated for early November. We are also working with Caltrans to do a call that looks at ATP Successes and Achievements from the earlier cycles. This is going to be done in anticipation of the next call for projects, recognizing that there's a lot of different kinds of programming and projects that can occur under ATP, lots of costs, different geographies, that we are trying to figure out a way to share what are those successes so that everyone who's interested in the upcoming cycle will have a little more to go on based on existing ATP awards. So be on the lookout for that. And with that, that's actually my last announcement. I want to thank everyone again for being with us on this call, and please be sure to look out for that email. Everyone have a great day, and thank you again to all of our panelists. Signing off.